Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 3 stories for you from the malicious compliance subreddit. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from 7 Dory Native. Ignore the red lights and cones at your peril. This isn't really my malicious compliance, as I was just a slightly hot and grumpy witness, but it just popped into my mind on my way home from my shift, and I figured I'd post it here. About a decade ago, while I was waiting for my current department to hire, I took a job with a private EMS company as an EMTI on a fast response motorcycle unit, contracted out to our local freeway agency for accident response. It was an okay gig. Long hours and riding 300 plus kilometers every day killed my love of biking, but it beat the heck out of working on an ambulance. The same agency also staffed pickups with safety crews for the purpose of lane closures and scene safety. While we were a quasi-governmental unit, we had no real authority outside of that allowed to us by the Fire Brigade Services Act, and often had motorists ignore our suggestions when it came to not driving through accident scenes. This meant that police units still had to smack peepees occasionally, and it was usually quite fun to watch. I had the pleasure of working the same stretch of freeway as a certain Metro Police motor unit, and I watched him screw with people a few times. 2 specific times come to mind. The first time I saw this salty old bugger use his powers of craphousery was after a multi-vehicle pileup just after an aggressive bend in the freeway that closed down 3 of the 4 lanes of traffic, causing a line of cars that stretched for a few kilometers back around the bend, meaning that cars at the rear couldn't see what was causing the delay up front. A number of drivers decided that they were too important to wait and drove up the hard shoulder, half on the road and half on the grass, to mosey on by the accident scene, leaving the rule-abiding drivers to sit in the hot sun looking at us with dismay. After a few of them snuck by, nearly hitting crews who were busy treating patients and almost taking out a recovery vehicle, this absolute stud of a man got fed up and moved his bike into the shoulder, but in such a way that they weren't able to see him. Every car he stopped got told to park up and wait while he waited for his next victim. After he'd collected a gaggle of about 20 of them, he slowly made his way up the line, ticket book in hand, to have an unhurried chat with each driver individually. Not only did I get to watch each idiot eat an almighty fine for leaving the roadway and ignoring emergency vehicles, they also had the pleasure of sitting there as the scene was cleared before being allowed back into traffic, turning a 20-minute delay into nearly an hour of baking in the noonday sun. There was much gnashing of teeth and mutterings of, "Don't you have anything better to do, officer?" While that was pretty funny to me, the best I saw of him was a few months later when we got a call for a scrap metal hauler that was quite impressively overloaded that had managed to roll over while on the 2-lane overpass connecting the same national freeway to the city freeway that led into the industrial area south of the city center. This thing must have been pushing 40,000 kilograms when it wedged itself nose against the right-hand concrete barrier and tail digging a deep gouge into the counterpart barrier on the left. This meant that there wasn't a ball hair on either side of the truck, and traffic was diverted at the entrance to the overpass, around 500 meters up from the scene. I didn't technically need to be there at this point, as the driver had been taken to hospital and the road was closed awaiting the arrival of 2 heavy rigs to lift and recover the truck and contents. I was leaning on my Suzuki, perving over this officer's BMW R1200 RT when we noticed that the crew of the safety unit at the closure was having difficulty with a vehicle that seemed to think they were above the law and were aggressively trying to get by the pickup, cones, and angry men in reflective gear. Seeing this and the potential for injury, he told them to wave the car through. As it zoomed down and then up to us on the top of the overpass, he winked at me, and when they stopped behind the very heavy and very wedged truck, he wandered over to have a chat with the driver, who was apparently the spokeswoman for the 4-strong irritation of Karens within. The crux of his chat with her was that he certainly understood their point about needing to get to their highly important destination, but that the road they had elected to use was currently blocked by 40 tons of mangled steel. And he was sure they would agree it would be dangerous for her to drive back against the traffic, considering that we had heavy rigs and support vehicles arriving and setting up. He apologized for the inconvenience, but directed them to park up by our bikes and wait for the rigs to do their thing, after which we could all be on our merry way. It took about an hour to get the road clear, after which they most definitely weren't making eye contact and appeared like beaten dogs as he finally wished them safe travels on their way. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called Squirreltail. It says, "Why yes, you can come this way, despite the cones and people invest saying you can't, but it will be a little bit of a delay." So I was a tow truck driver before I started KCC, as a lot of you already know, and I ran into a lot of situations where people did think they were more important. So if I had to block a road or even a car in a parking lot, I would have people get very pissed off. One in particular, I had my rollback connected to a little Volkswagen Beetle. I was just getting ready to pull it up, and a guy walked up to me and said, "You need to move that." And I said, "Well, it's going to take me less than 5 minutes to get the car up there, so just bear with me." And he said, "Well, why should I have to wait?" Apparently, I hadn't grown a set of balls at that point, so I just pulled everything forward and let the douchebag go. But that's just an example of one of the people I ran into in that job that thought that their time was so much more important than mine. This story comes to us from Workstorm242, Muddy Drill Sergeant. First of all, I got mad respect for the uniform and all servicemen, past and present, except for one. Here's my story. When I was 19, I did my military service as was custom for young men in my country. See, I am not American. Anyhow, I did enjoy my time in the Defense Force quite a lot. Made some new friends, learned a lot of new stuff, and I also bought me 1 year of thinking of what to do with my life. I had some plans to continue in uniform one way or another, but that is not really interesting in this story. What is interesting is some basic facts to keep in mind during my story, however. First of all, I did my military service 15 minutes drive from home, which meant I knew all the area around the base pretty well since I had grown up in there. I am also that kind of person that will ask questions to learn more, and who will always try to put in my best effort in everything I do, and also to learn the rules. As a new recruit, there is a ton of things to learn. How to dress, how many buttons to button, and so on. Shaving of the hair is encouraged but not mandatory. Same goes for facial hair. Personally, I enjoy having a bit of hair on top, but shaved on the sides. And here, my antagonist enters the story. One of the 3 drill sergeants that was set to teach us the basics of soldiering. I was quick to learn the ropes, maybe not the most fit of the recruits, but certainly not the sloppiest either. Every morning we would line up for inspection, and the drill sergeants would inspect each and every one of us recruits, often finding small defects to complain about, sending us away to correct. And each time it happened to me, I would always smile and say, "Yes sir," and go and correct it, knowing there was nothing to correct. It was just a way to drill us. Now, one of the sergeants, let's call him Sergeant B, Sergeant B always found something to complain about on everyone, and I think it annoyed him that I always smiled. Sergeant B was shorter than average and somewhat rounded, not fat, just a bit chunkier than average as well. Instead of talking loud like the others, he preferred screaming, especially in the face of people. I guess he had seen too many war movies with bad drill instructors in them. That did not go down well with us conscripts, really. We quickly lost respect for him as a person, but we did respect him for being our superior officer. Or his uniform, if that makes sense. Anyhow, he did not seem to like me at all and would always mess with me. And one day, I got my revenge. It was in the fall. We were outside the base training for a bigger exercise coming up. They had divided us into groups of 8, and our mission was to relocate from one location to another. We had all our personal equipment like backpack, weapon, and so on, plus the group tent, stove, and heavy pew-pew. So we were quite heavy equipment-wise, and I was assigned group leader this event. Good thing, we were in an area I knew well, so navigating was easy since I knew all paths in the forest and so on. And Sergeant B was tagging along, not knowing I knew the area, but my team knew. The path we took ended up at a small swamp and would split so you could walk around the swamp on either side. I decided we should take a 5-minute rest since we were ahead of schedule anyway. Sgt B did not like that, even though I think honestly he was the one who needed it the most since he was the one huffing and puffing, despite he didn't carry anything except his uniform and a water bottle. I asked my team which side around the swamp they wanted to go and told them the pros and cons of each way. I don't remember which way we chose, but I remember I picked up the machine pew pew, 12.4 kilograms, so quite heavy. Now, Sgt B intervened and demanded I check the map, but I said we already decided to go around the swamp. For some reason, Sgt B wanted us to cross the swamp. It looked dry enough to cross, but I declined and said we'd go around. This is where he pulled rank and demanded we cross. Cue my malicious compliance. I asked him if he would take command of the group and lead us across, to which he replied, "I'll take command, group follow me." So I stood down and let him past me. I think he managed to take about 1.5 steps into the swamp before he had sunken down to his waist in mud. We decided not to follow him, and instead we all just looked at him. After a while, one of the others asked him, "Any new orders, sir?" We pulled him out of the swamp. He was furious but didn't say a word. He walked back the way we came in his wet, muddy uniform. The rest of us continued around the swamp. We did not see him back in camp that day. After that incident, he did not bother me anymore for the rest of my conscription time. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Cloudy Automation. It says, "The downside of knowing a place well and not needing to use a map is that the map reading skills don't get improved. Should one ever get deployed and need to read an armed forces topographical map, the skills to read such map may not exist when really needed. To get to the other area wasn't really the point of the exercise. Still, Sergeant Muddy learned that maps aren't not always fully accurate, up to date, and include seasonal conditions." When we got to the point of the sergeant getting into the mud up to his waist, I'm sitting back here thinking, how did they not all laugh at this situation? It must have been really hard to keep it all inside while Sergeant Swampass was down there in the mud. While this was a fun story, I definitely have to agree with the commenter that you need those map reading skills, so regardless of if you know the area or not, you should still be using the map to really hone those skills. This story comes to us from Staff Accountant Dude. Want me to cover the front desk while working on payroll? Enjoy your angry employees. I, 29 male, am a staff accountant having worked at the same CPA, certified public accountant firm for 9 years. I've had several coworkers over the years, and by this point, I am the most senior aside from the CPA who owns the firm. I love my boss. He pays well, no dress code, doesn't clock watch, and doesn't micromanage. I produce great work for him, and he leaves me alone. It could not be more perfect. A little about my responsibilities. I do payroll for about 8 clients, as well as ours. This is important. Books for about 12 others, preparation of the books for tax returns, as well as work on partnership and corporation returns. I'm basically the business package, really. Of the 5 staff accountants my boss employs, I'm the only one who knows payroll. My boss doesn't know how to do payroll, which is not uncommon. Quite a few CPAs out there who don't know it, and my coworkers have no interest in learning it. I don't blame them, because I often bitch and moan because my clients are really bad about sending correct hours the first time around, resulting in having to redo everything from the pay stubs to payroll taxes. It's awful sometimes, but it's also job security. We recently merged with another CPA firm. My boss ensured that we still only report to him, as it's an equal partnership. I don't quite know the workings, and frankly, I don't care, as long as I only report to my same boss. So our office went from 7 people, 1 CPA, 5 staff accountants, and a receptionist, to 18 people, 2 managing CPAs, 3 people who freshly got their CPA, 11 staff accountants, and 2 receptionists. The other CPA firm was using ADP, third-party payroll service, for their payroll because it's just not a thing anyone knew there. So my boss asked me if I was fine taking on additional employees in ours, which I told him I was, since we got paid monthly. The managing CPAs will be managers from here on out. The other CPA firm we merged with made it pretty clear that they didn't like us. I presume it's because their boss was a complete tight butt. He was the very opposite of my boss. Dress code was always semi-formal, and he was just always on someone about something that was wrong. Me, having been there the longest, I was highest on the weird office hate thing. It got to the point where I got them trying to snoop on my computer a few times, which is also integral to the story. My boss said to just start locking my office when I leave now, so that's what I do now. The other manager had a rule where if the receptionists are out, one of the staff accountants needs to cover front desk. My boss had no issue with that, as that was our rule as well. Luck would have it, both our receptionists had called out one day. The other manager asked me to cover downstairs for the day. I had told him no because I'm working on payroll all day, and that is sensitive information. I didn't say it was our payroll, but our payroll was on my to-do list. He said he didn't care and told me to get downstairs. I had called my boss and he asked me to just please cover and that he would talk to the other manager. The other manager had a big old smirk on his face. I reluctantly went downstairs in an annoyed, sour mood, but then a brilliant idea popped up. I'll work on our payroll downstairs. So I started working on our payroll and got all the stubs processed and ready for direct deposit. After that, I started working on the payroll taxes. Think Social Security and Medicare. Part of working on payroll taxes is having a summary of the payroll you just ran. Conveniently, I needed to go to the bathroom. So I minimized all the windows on the receptionist's computer and I called upstairs to see if someone could cover while I go. As good fortune had it, one of the snoopers was the one who came downstairs. So I go to the bathroom and I take a little longer than normal because why not? To add additional context, I make considerably more than all of the managing CPA's employees, including his fresh CPAs. I get back to my desk and he leaves. All my windows aren't minimized anymore. The payroll summary is the first window on screen. The payroll summary shows everything. And I mean everything. The snooper immediately told everyone, including the other manager. Now, all my coworkers already had an idea of what I made. However, the other employees were livid. None of the other employees wanted to work unless they made what I made. The other manager was seconds from blowing a gasket, but he knew there was nothing he could do to me. I asked my boss to show him the cameras pointed at the reception desk so he could see exactly what happened. It was all there on camera that he was going through my work. Needless to say, I don't cover the front desk anymore, and his employees' morale dropped hard. I do feel bad for them though, even if they are jerks to me. A decent bunch of them left, and maybe about half of them had replacements, so we're down about 4 people. My boss wasn't particularly happy about the situation as a whole, but he said we'll get through it. Moral of the story, don't F with the only person who knows payroll. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TechNot. It says, "Damn, I figured you were just going to delay payroll by a day or something to piss everyone off. This is going nuclear on an office. Management hates when people compare salaries." I understand this one completely because, my favorite previous boss, Rick, he told me that I wasn't allowed to talk about my salary to anybody else that was in the place we worked at. But I guess what he didn't know was that I'm actually protected from repercussions if I discuss my salary. The only people that benefit from salaries not being talked about is the workplace themselves. OP opened up a pretty big can of worms here, but I still say it was very well done.